The key, really very important message for the yeshiva world is
Rabbi Singer, welcome to the program. A war just broke out in the past 24 hours. We've been getting incoming ballistic hypersonic missiles from Iran. We've been running to the shelters every hour for the past 24 hours. What could you tell us about this moment that we're in right now in the month of Adar?
it's the time, it's that month, the last month of the calendar where Vinahapahu, everything is turned around. And Nisan, the month of the redemption, is right ahead of us. So we're literally there. We're there. We're where our great grandparents could not imagine their wildest dreams. And we're here and there now.
I'm in editing. I just ran to the safe room and there was a direct hit, a loud boom from a hypersonic missile launched from Iran that right now the sirens are blaring.
The rockets just fell down over there.
Ambulances are outside. Let's all say a prayer.
The Rambam, who's, the ultimate rationalist, would go, stop speculating. The generation of the Gula, they'll understand exactly what these psukim mean. And they couldn't have known. We are living now, so now we can say with confidence we know exactly what's going on here. They couldn't. They just didn't have access to it because we're absolutely. And there's a mice sudden that yeshivas are not teaching Navi. It's mamish crazy because we're in the most literate generation since Chizkiyahu. My grandfather, blessed memory, told me that when he lived in Europe, he said the average kid, they didn't have to, they knew they went to Cheder and then they went to work, whatever it was. They took the brightest kids and they did send them off to the great yeshivas. They took the prodigies and they were sent off to sit and learn. But the amount of literacy today that everybody knows how to learn is unprecedented since the days of Chizkiyahu. And that we are not learning these Nevi'im in particular, what I call the oracular Nevi'im, is mind-blowing. Only Sutton could be responsible for that, because it doesn't make sense. The key, really very important message for the yeshiva world is they have to get into Navi. We need giants to stand up and say, our fight with the Haskalah movement is long over. The key part is Iran. The key part is the Jews return to the land. The key part is the land giving forth its fruit. That's why the Gemara says. It makes sense. Why the Gemara says after the Gemara goes through all the different signs of Mashiach, and all these things, there's no greater sign than land giving forth its fruit for the Jews. That seems to be a mundane thing. Imagine for a moment that the land wasn't fertile, if we can. Just let's reverse it. Let's say this land was like the United States, which doesn't care who puts a seed in the ground. So what would happen is that all the other nations that had conquered these lands would have been able to live off the land and not have to rely on it.
And they tried
it nothing.
in every generation.
Why? Because the land says, I'm not making babies for you.
And they had all the reason to try because they knew if they could develop the land, then the Jews can't get here.
They just can't get here, and they could even.
So that Christendom and Islam both had a reason to try.
That's a religious reason. All the Teicha, both Leviticus 26, Deuteronomy 28, and everywhere else, is if you're doing the right thing, you're going to defeat your enemies, right? When Yeshua comes in and things don't go well, right? So we're doing something wrong, right? So doing well on the battlefield indicates that God is with you, and not doing well on the battlefield means God is not with you.
So I think that, in my eyes, that's even more powerful, because that's saying that, like, right now Israel is God's land, and the Jewish people are in God's land, and God's name is at stake in these wars.
Right.
In other words, this is why the whole world was created, for this setup that Israel becomes the center of attention. The Jews get there, and God glorifies His name. That was your entire
that's
Torah.
That's the whole point.
That's like we say on Musaf and Rosh Hashanah. We say the whole song that all nations will know and bow to Hashem. They'll all see it.
If you saw the early Zionist movement, you saw Herzl and Weizmann and Ben Gurion, I understand that they were taking yeshiva guys out of Europe, Lithuania, whatever. That this is the problematic group. I understand that, but That's not the case today. That's not the case now. In any case, we are now living in that time. And just like, you remember when we were kids, they would take out an ad in the newspaper telling Jews not to go to a Reform and Conservative temple to hear Tekir Shefer because you're not Yotzin, it's better you don't hear it. So there used to be, when I was a kid in the 60s and 70s, because then the Reform movement and the Conservative movement were like at the height, very big, and the Orthodox were low. So there were always ads taken out, even in the New York Times, an ad saying, come out by the good Sarabonim, that a Jew, if you cannot go to an Orthodox shul, it's better to not hear Tekir on Rosh Hashanah. It's better to stay home and not hear, not to go into a Reform and Conservative temple. They used to put out, that was every year, every year. Do not go into a Reform or Conservative temple, no matter what. Even if it's under the conservative movement, even with a mechitza, because there were, like in Montreal, there's a few synagogues still that are conservative, but they're under the conservative movement that have a mechitza. It's really weird. The point is that in the old days, it was a thing that good would come out with it, not
But
allowed
that
to
was
hear.
fear-based. That was fear because they were losing Jews. There was no Torah in the
No, it
world.
was just it was no. I think they were being very sincere. They were saying you should have to understand that if you want to get to Kir Shefer with a minion, do not go into conservative temple. It's better you stay home. Just that's all. That's all they would say. It was every year. It was a very big thing. They took it ads all over. Cannot go in. Okay, but the point is those ads don't exist. I'm older than you, so if you ask all the guys who are my age, so everyone remembers this. Why? Because then the the conservative movement was very, very big and very, very popular. It was huge. Even the conservative movement had its own hashgacha in Philadelphia. They had a conservative movement that had their own hashgacha, and so they were in the ascent at the time. But now no one takes out those ads because they're gone. They're finished. So whatever that was, that's an old battle. It's gone. The reform conservative is just disappearing, or becoming either many of them becoming Bali Tshuva. We're meeting all of them today who grew up in the conservative reform movement who are now B'nai Torah. That's it. But it means the war is over. Get back into Navi. Whatever reason you had, this is not the time not to learn Navi.
I researched it recently that
Yeah.
the question if most Jews are in Israel today, and it seems like that is the case, and that would change. Shemitah coming up in 2.5 years would be
Right.
deraisa. That would change a lot of things.
That would change a lot of things. There's a big question. There's a big issue, and this is something that I and Rudy Rockman is by a lot of people behind it. And that is, there are a lot of people in Africa who mamish have a Messiah the Jewish and conduct themselves totally Jewish, and their DNA is Jewish. Like the Lumba in the tribe in South Africa that said we have Messiah that were Kohanim, and they have the Y chromosome Kohanim. In Nigeria, the Igbos. So if that turns out the way it looks like, this is because when Nigeria, when all these African countries have come, they just took different tribes and just slammed them together and created artificial countries. That's why the boundaries, if you look at Africa, the boundaries between different countries is a straight line, because all the colonials did was they took out a ruler and a pencil and said, okay, this is Nigeria, this is Liberia, and that's the end of it. Whereas in Europe, the countries don't follow any straight lines. The other big question is Afghanistan, which is very transparent that there's huge numbers of Jews. I mean, everything is pointing in that direction. You and I could mamish walk. We're in Asia, technically. We can walk to Europe. We can walk to Africa because we can walk in the tunnel of the Suez Canal.
I met a guy last week who drove his Volkswagen Beetle all the way from South Africa to Israel. A couple.
Really? So I've driven to Africa a number of times. There is mamish like the Lincoln Tunnel that goes under the Suez Canal.
Wow.
Mamish. It's like I don't know how many miles it is. It's longer than Lincoln Tunnel. But so the canal is on top, but underneath there's a 4-lane highway that's like the Holland Tunnel, but 4 lanes, not 2 lanes. It's like I think 2 and 2. So I've driven to Africa many
Wow.
times. Oh yeah.
From Israel, you've driven to Africa.
Yes.
That's amazing.
It's not amazing. It really is nothing.
No,
No,
it's like-
I wasn't behind the wheel. There's a taxi cab. So you get off in Taba and you hire taxis, very cheap because labor costs nothing in Egypt. And you get in. And I wanted to go to Africa. So the taxi will take you. You can be in Hurghada in 10 hours from Eilat. It's a 10-hour drive. And you pass by Mount Sinai, incidentally, if you drive that way. Anyways, a good nacht. And,
Thank you very much.